When I was 8, the heir of the Marquis of Genbei, my betrothed since childhood, lost his footing and fell while mischievously climbing a wooden ladder in an abandoned turret of the estate. I dashed forward, regardless of my own safety, literally taking the fall as his meat cushion. He was unharmed, but my heart meridians were shattered. I fell into a prolonged coma, becoming the living dead known to all in the capital. The year I was 18, I finally managed to crawl back from the gates of hell. But my future husband, just so my concubine-born sister who had been lost in the countryside could smoothly inherit the Marquis Manor's property, actually was cruel enough to push me off the top of that corner tower, leaving me to fall onto the bluestone ground. My bones broken and tendons snapped, my soul returning to the Yellow Springs. But I actually returned via rebirth, and even saw gilded writing floating in mid-air. The male lead is reborn back to 8 years old. Last life, the male lead fell from a 3-jang-high corner tower and smashed the female support into a living corpse. As long as the female side character is gone, the male lead can immediately bring the female lead back from the countryside to the Marquise's manor to take her place. In this life, no one can stop the male and female leads from wielding the power of the Marquise's manor and creating a beautiful legend of fake childhood sweethearts. Is that so? I lowered my gaze and curled my lips, whispering soundlessly to my future husband who was plummeting through the air. Husband, if you die, I'll simply find someone to replace you. When I was 8 to save Chiyu, the heir of the Marquis of Genbei, I was crushed into a vegetative state, bedridden for 10 years. I woke up at 18, only opening my eyes again. I was back to being 8 years old. Right at the moment, he was falling from the corner tower, about to crash onto me. Scenes from my previous life flooded into my mind. I dashed forward regardless of my safety, was heavily crushed by him. My heart meridians shattered, and became a living corpse who slept for 10 years, waking up at 18. What awaited me instead was the fatal blow of him pushing me off the corner tower again. For the sake of Shalaran, with almost no hesitation, relying on the reflexes of an adult soul and my survival instinct, I used all my strength to roll hard to the side. The expensive silk dress on my body rasped against the rough ground, and a burning, scraping pain shot through my arms and knees. But I successfully avoided the fate of being directly crushed. Bang! The muffled thud of a heavy object landing exploded beside me. Ouch! Chiyu fell hard onto the ground, letting out a cry of pain. Though it wasn't high, it was enough to hurt. He looked like a total mess, with his hair crown askew, his brocade robes covered in dust, and his small face scrunched up in pain. Almost simultaneously, lines of flowing gilded text suddenly appeared in mid-air right in front of me. Plot deviation: the male lead, Chiyu, fell from the turret, but surprisingly didn't hit the female support Xia Xiling. Aha! What is happening? Wasn't the female support supposed to be the human cushion and turn into the living dead? How can the plot go on now? Baby Chiyu must be in pain from the fall, right? My heart aches so much. It is all this Xia Zheling's fault. Why didn't she just behave and lie down to break his fall? +1. The female support is just a nuisance, causing our male lead to fall. Without her, the male lead could have gone smoothly to pick up the real female lead Lel and bring her back to the residence. Lely is still suffering in the countryside, and just because this female support didn't die, she has to wait many more years. I am so mad. Looking at these prejudice-filled words, my heart felt utterly cold. So, in a place unseen by me, there was such a group of spectators. In their eyes, there were only Chiyu and Shalaran. My pain and life were nothing but stepping stones. In their plot, good. Very good. In this life, I am going to see exactly who is whose stepping stone. I quickly suppressed the cold glint in my eyes, and almost instantly, my eyes reddened, with big tears rolling down like beads off a broken string. I struggled to crawl up and threw myself beside Chiyu, who was still groaning on the ground. My voice was choked with sobs, filled with terror and worry. Brother Air, Brother Air. Are you all right? Where did you get hurt? Does it hurt? I reached out, looking all flustered as I tried to help him up. But my fingertips accidentally pressed right on the elbow he'd landed on first, just moments ago. Chiyu instantly sucked in a sharp breath, yelling out in pain. Hiss! Be gentle! He violently shook off my hand. The look in his eyes held pain, along with a trace of shock. He didn't have time to hide, and anger. He probably never expected that I, his fiancé, who usually obeyed his every command and would have ripped my heart out for him, actually didn't foolishly rush up to be his human cushion this time. I was pushed away by him and went with the flow, slumping to the ground. I cried even more heartbrokenly, my shoulders trembling slightly. Boo-hoo, Brother Shizi. I am sorry. I couldn't catch you. I was so scared. But inside I was sneering, Chiyu. This is just the beginning. The pain you inflicted on me, I will return to you bit by bit, with interest. What is going on? Lord Air, miss. Hurried footsteps and cries of alarm drew near. The Marquis Manor's guards, older female servants, and maids rushed over upon hearing the news, instantly surrounding the small backyard so tightly that not a drop of water could trickle through. The scene was in total chaos. Some went to support Chiyu, and others came to hold me up. I stood up with the maid's support, still sobbing softly, looking like I was scared out of my wits. But my gaze swept over the corner, as if by accident. Right there in the shadows of that abandoned turret, I saw a thin, small figure, a boy of about 7 or 8, wearing tattered clothes that had been washed pale, was standing there quietly, as if he had merged with the shadows. He had a pair of unusually calm black eyes, quietly watching this chaos. It is Qianzhou, that illegitimate son of the Marquis of Genbei who was left wandering outside. The boy who was later taken back to the manor, and eventually, through my schemes, replaced Chiyu. The bullet comments flashed before my eyes again. Huh? Why is that little bastard Qianzhou here too? What bad luck. Look at that shabby look of his. He must have sneaked into the Marquise's manor to beg for food. Right? Scram. Hurry up and scram. Don't dirty the male lead's eyes. I lowered my lashes, masking the shrewd glint that flashed in the depths of my eyes. Qianzhou, perhaps. In this life, you will be my best, Ali. That fall of Chiyu's after all. He fell from a place that wasn't too high. Coupled with his young age and light body, aside from some superficial bruises and a sprained wrist, there was nothing serious. On the contrary, it was me, due to excessive fright, plus the minor scrapes caused by rolling to dodge. I was told by the manor doctor to rest in bed for a few days. So naturally, I became the one who needed to be cared for. For a time, the courtyard I was in was actually even a bit more lively than Chiyu's place. Although father's official rank isn't as illustrious as the Marquis of Genbei, he is still a leading figure among the principled civil officials, and mother comes from a prestigious clan in Zhangyan. For a legitimate daughter like me to have such an accident happen right in our own manor, my parents were naturally shocked and furious, and inevitably had some complaints about the Marquis of Genbei's household. The Marquis of Genbei came personally to apologize. His attitude was sincere enough since they were in the wrong to begin with. Plus, my parents ultimately had to consider our in-law ties with the Marquise's manor and appearances at court, so they didn't reprimand him too harshly. They only emphasized that security at the manor must be tightened in the future, and that abandoned corner tower in particular must be torn down as soon as possible to prevent further mishaps. As for these dealings between the adults, I just need to lie in bed and play the part of the frightened, frail victim. The real show lies with Chiyu. Sure enough, on the 3rd day of my illness, he came. Behind him followed 2 servants, holding brocade boxes, containing some precious medicinal herbs and exquisite trinkets. Sister Ling, are you feeling any better? His voice arrived before he did, carrying a deliberately softened tone. I leaned against the soft pillows, having deliberately let the maid powder my face paler. Hearing the sound, I lifted my eyes, eyelashes trembling lightly, a watery sheen instantly filling my eyes. My voice thin and weak. "Brother Eyre, you are here, your injury, is it all right?" I struggled to get up, but he took 2 quick steps to the bedside and pressed down lightly. "Quick! Don't move. Just lie there properly." He sat down on the edge of the bed, his gaze roaming over my face, carrying a hint of scrutiny. "I am not seriously hurt. But I heard you were frightened and scraped your arm. I really feel terrible about it." His tone was gentle, even carrying just the right amount of guilt. "That day, it was my fault. I was too playful and climbed that abandoned building, and I dragged you into it." Sob, sob, the male lead is so gentle. Even though he has still hurt himself, he came to see the female supporting character first. And he is blaming himself so much. He is really too kind. Yeah, it is not like he fell on purpose. It was just an accident. The female supporting character didn't even say anything, yet he is already feeling guilty. Where can you find a male lead like this? Shajiling really hit the jackpot. The floating subtitles started flooding the screen again, filled with bias between the lines. I sneered in my heart, but my face revealed an even more terrified and uneasy expression as I hurriedly shook my head. No, no, it is not Brother Shizi's fault. It was me not being sharp enough. I couldn't catch you. As I spoke, tears were about to fall again. If I had reacted a bit faster then, Brother Shizi wouldn't have fallen. As I spoke, I quietly observed his reaction. A trace of barely noticeable annoyance flashed through his eyes very quickly. Although it was quickly covered by concern, I still caught it. He wasn't truly guilty. Perhaps there was a trace of lingering fear, but mostly, it was the annoyance of things slipping out of his control, as well as his probing into me, this unexpected variable. His ideal development would have been me getting crushed into critical condition while he remained unharmed. And then, as a matter of course, perhaps even due to guilt and responsibility, he could bring Shalaran back to the manor early to care for her. But now, I didn't die. I wasn't seriously injured. I just suffered a fright. And this upset his plans. "Sister Ling, you absolutely must not say that." He suppressed his impatience, his tone remaining gentle. "If I hadn't been so unruly, this sort of thing wouldn't have happened. It is already a huge stroke of luck that you are okay." He paused, then asked, seemingly unintentionally. "It is just that corner tower had been in disrepair for years, and the wooden ladder snapped so suddenly, it was truly extremely dangerous. Sister Ling, at that moment, how did you think to dodge to the side? It is here. The test is here." Alarm bells rang softly in my mind, but my face remained a picture of blank confusion and lingering fear. I answered between sobs. I don't know either. When I saw Brother Shizi fall, I was terrified. My mind went blank. I just felt a black shadow pressing down. My legs went soft, and I just rolled to the side. I lifted my teary eyes to look at him, my gaze pure and filled with reliance. "Brother Shizi, am I useless? I couldn't even save you." I deliberately chalked up my dodging to an instinctive reaction from being startled. For an 8-year-old girl in that situation, doing anything wouldn't be too strange. Chiyu stared into my eyes, seemingly trying to find a flaw. But in my eyes, there were only real tears and just the right amount of fear and reliance. He looked for a moment, appearing to find nothing amiss, and only then did he breathe a slight sigh of relief, his tone lightening up as well. "What nonsense. You being fine is what matters most. If you had really been seriously injured for my sake, I'd be the one feeling guilty for a lifetime. The male lead is so nice. He is even comforting the female supporting character." Exactly. The female supporting character only knows how to cry and snivel, It is annoying just looking at her. I hope the female supporting character gets better soon and stops pestering the male lead. The male lead still has to go pick up Lele. I scoffed inwardly, a lifetime. Your guilt, in the last life, only lasted until I woke up, and then you pushed me into the abyss. Brother Shizi. I timidly reached out my hand, grabbing a corner of his robe, relying on him just like before. From now on, don't climb that high again, okay? Linger is scared. His body stiffened almost imperceptibly, clearly not used to me being so clingy while sick. But with everyone watching, he could only muster the patience to soothe me. Okay, I'll listen to Sister Ling. I won't climb anymore. He sat for a while longer, said some superficial words of concern, then used the excuse of not disturbing my rest to get up and leave. Watching his back as he practically fled, I wiped the tears from the corners of my eyes, my gaze turning cold again. This is just the beginning, Chiyu. Your hypocrisy has lost its effect on me. For the next few days, Chiyu came to Reborn Inn almost every day. Every time he came, he brought just the right gifts and concern, spoke gently, and behaved properly. To outsiders, he was simply the model of a perfect fiancé. Even when my mother came to see me, she privately sighed. Brother Yu has become much more sensible after this incident. It seems he knows the gravity of things now. I sneered in my heart. He isn't being sensible, he is monitoring me. He is confirming whether I, this variable, am stable, and whether I'll cause any further impact on his plans. At the same time, he was constantly probing with his words. Sometimes he would unintentionally bring up the scenery at the corner tower, asking if I thought the view there was good. Sometimes he would sigh about the prosperity of the capital, wondering what things were like in the countryside. Every time, I responded with an innocent and ignorant look, either saying, "It is so high up there, Linger is scared," or, "Wherever Brother Shizi goes, Linger goes," portraying a heart, infatuated with him to the fullest extent. Every time he got this kind of answer, his look would become complex for a moment, appearing relieved, yet also annoyed. Those subtitles in the air also praised him and belittled me every day, never repeating themselves. The male lead is truly a gentleman, coming to visit every day, rain or shine. The female side character just knows how to lie in bed enjoying the male lead's care. Can't she get better quickly? It is annoying just seeing that delicate look of hers. Our Lela is so strong out in the countryside. Hope the female side character recovers soon. Once she is better, the male lead can find a reason to go pick up Lela. Through these subtitles, I vaguely pieced together some information. After Chiyu's rebirth, his greatest obsession is to get Shalaran back to the Marquise's manor as soon as possible to take my place. And my existence is the biggest obstacle. During my time bedridden, I wasn't idle either. I secretly had my personal maid keep an eye on the movements in the manor, especially regarding that figure in the corner, Chi Yanzhou. The news the maid brought back was in bits and pieces, but when pieced together, it sketched out a vague and difficult picture of survival. Chi Yanzhou, the son born to the mistress of Qizheng, the Marquis of Junbei. His birth mother was said to be a lowly embroiderer who had long since died of illness. Perhaps the Marquis had some true affection for this mistress, or perhaps he simply cared about his bloodline. But a year ago, he brought the then 7-year-old Qi Yanzhou back to the manor. But the Marquis was busy with affairs, and the madam detested this matter to her core, suppressing and ostracizing him both openly and secretly. Qi Yanzhou's status in the manor was worse than even a decent servant. He was placed in the most remote and run-down courtyard with shabby clothes and meager food. The Marquis seemed to tacitly consent to this neglect. As long as he didn't die, he wouldn't ask questions. Chiyu viewed him as a thorn in his side, often bringing servant boys to humiliate and beat him. He appeared near the corner tower that day, most likely summoned by someone sent by Chiyu who planned to mess with him, but by a twist of fate, he witnessed that accident instead. The floating subtitles were utterly vicious toward him. Why hasn't that bastard been kicked out yet? Just looking at him is bad luck. I heard his mother was a lowly woman. No wonder her son is no good either. Why doesn't Heir Chiyu teach him a lesson more often? Let him know who the real master of the Marquis Manor is. Every time I see these malicious words, I understand Xianzhou's plight a bit more, and feel a bit more empathy as a fellow sufferer. We are all unwanted extra people. Stumbling blocks in Chiyu and Shalaran's love story. The difference is, in the last life I was foolishly used until I died. But in this life, I am going to drag everyone they trampled on, and together we'll smash the stumbling blocks right back into their faces. So on this day, Chiyu came to visit again. My body had gradually improved, and I could sit leaning against the soft couch by the window. Outside the window, the spring sun was bright, and the crabapples in the courtyard were blooming perfectly. Chiyu sat across from me, speaking absent-mindedly, but his gaze drifted out the window from time to time, brushing past that crabapple tree blooming most luxuriantly, his eyes holding a trace of imperceptible annoyance and impatience. I knew he wasn't looking at the flowers. He was thinking of Shalaran, who was likely in the countryside right now, growing like wild grass. He probably felt that the splendor of this marquise's manor, and this so-called fiancé pampered in the deep boudoir, couldn't compare to a single finger of Shalaran's. I lowered my eyes, hiding the mockery in their depths, and when I looked up again, a naive and innocent smile rippled across my face as I pointed at that crabapple tree. Brother Shizi, look how well those flowers are blooming. It looks much better than that bare look over by the corner tower. I brought up the corner tower on purpose. Sure enough, Chiyu's expression shifted, and he turned to look at me, his eyes holding a look of scrutiny. The corner tower, Sister Ling still remembers what the corner tower looks like? I tilted my head, looking completely innocent. I remember, even though I was scared that time, when I stood at the bottom looking up, I felt the tower was so high, like it could touch the sky. I paused, revealing an expression that was both yearning and filled with lingering fear. It is just too dangerous, otherwise the view from up there must be really nice, right? Did Brother Shizi used to go up there to play often? These words of mine seemed innocent and naive, but in reality, every sentence was stabbing right at Chiyu's heart, reminding him of his sorry state that day, hinting at the danger of the corner tower, and unintentionally pointing out the naughtiness of him, often going up there to play. Chiyu's expression shifted slightly, and the scrutiny in his eyes grew more intense as he looked at me. He seemed to be judging whether my words were truly unintentional, or if there was an underlying meaning. I widened my clear, innocent eyes and looked back at him calmly, my face showing only pure curiosity and a childish yearning for high places. He looked at me for a good while, but ultimately couldn't detect anything unusual on my face, assuming it was just a child's nature, and that I was truly curious about high places. A glimmer of dark, unreadable light flashed in his eyes. Perhaps a new, more vicious plan was brewing in his mind. He twitched the corner of his mouth, forcing a gentle smile. Yeah, the scenery up there isn't bad. But Sister Ling is right. It is too dangerous. Let's not go there anymore. The male lead is so patient with the female supporting character, actually keeping her company to chat about such boring stuff. The female supporting character really knows how to touch a nerve. She did that on purpose to make the male lead remember unpleasant things. Right? Scheming. She is definitely scheming. Is the male lead thinking about something else? His look feels a bit deep. I looked at the subtitles, sneering in my heart, Chiyu. You'd better be thinking, the more you scheme to do evil, the more flaws you'll reveal. The inspiration I gave you, you'd better catch it well. Under my meticulous care, my health has finally greatly improved. I could get out of bed and walk around, go pay my respects to my parents, and even take a little stroll in our garden. The tense atmosphere in the manor caused by that accident of mine was gradually easing, but I knew this was just the calm before the storm. Sure enough, on the 10th day after I could walk normally, Mother called me over, her tone carrying a hint of pity and helplessness. Linger, You have a distant cousin whose family met with disaster. Her parents are both dead, and she has no one to rely on, so she will be coming to the manor today to stay for a while. As the elder sister, you must look after her. I understood clearly in my heart. She is here, Shalaron. Even though I avoided the fate of being crushed into a serious injury, she still made her entrance ahead of schedule, in accordance with Chiyu's plan. It is just that, in this life, her status changed from illegitimate sister lost in the countryside to distant cousin from a family in decline. I lowered my eyes and responded obediently. Yes, mother, I understand. I will surely treat this cousin well. In the afternoon, an inconspicuous small blue cloth sedan chair was carried in silently through the side door. The sedan curtain was lifted, and a skinny little girl stepped out, about 6 or 7 years old, shorter in stature than her peers. Wearing a coarse cloth dress that was obviously ill-fitting, washed out to the point of fading, and even patched. Her hair was withered and yellow, held up by the simplest wooden hairpin. Her small face was sharp and thin, her complexion sallow. Only her eyes were large and dark, currently sizing up the surroundings timidly, while her hands nervously twisted the hem of her clothes. What a pitiable, weather-beaten little white flower, if not for my rebirth, knowing the greedy and vicious heart beneath her skin. Even I would have been deceived by this appearance of hers. This must be Cousin Laron, right? I raised a perfectly appropriate friendly smile, one that an 8-year-old legitimate daughter ought to have, and stepped forward to take her cold, rough little hand. The journey must have been hard, right? Come in with me quickly. Mother is waiting in the flower hall. Shia Laran's body trembled almost imperceptibly, seeming flattered yet fearful. She hurriedly lowered her head, her voice as faint as a mosquito's. Laran. Greets cousin. I've caused trouble for cousin. She behaved extremely submissively, even shrinking back somewhat. But the moment I held her hand, I clearly felt the strength in her fingertips trying to grip back before quickly releasing, as well as the scorching gaze that flew past the cloud brocade dress on my body and the jade bangle on my wrist, a gaze almost impossible to conceal. Aha, the heroine is here. Our little angel Lele has finally appeared. Look at Lele's pitiful appearance. She must have suffered a lot in the countryside. My heart aches for her. Compared to Shah Jiling next to her, decked out in gold and silver, it really is a case of wine and meat rot behind vermilion gates while frozen bones lie by the roadside. Don't be scared, Lel. Things will get better. The male lead will protect you. The subtitles in the air were biased as always, impatiently waving flags and shouting for their heroine. I sneered in my heart but showed not a trace of it on my face, continuing to affectionately pull her toward the flower hall. What are you saying, sister? Since you are here, treat this place as your own home. In the flower hall, Mother sat in the seat of honor. Seeing Shalaron's pitiful appearance, she ultimately felt compassion and offered a few gentle words of comfort, then ordered the servants to take her down to wash up and get settled in the wing room next to my courtyard. Shia Laran kowtowed in gratitude, stepping carefully with every move, performing the humble posture of an orphan girl living under another's roofs to perfection. Shia Laran's arrival was like a stone thrown into a calm lake, spreading ripples through my small courtyard. On the surface, she was extremely respectful to me. This cousin, never missing a morning or evening greeting. She kept calling me sister with every breath, her voice sweet and soft. I also played the role of the generous and kind legitimate elder sister. She was new here and didn't have any clothes that fit. With a grand wave of my hand, I had the maid open my trunks and pick out a few sets of old clothes I wore 2 years ago that were already a bit short, and bestowed them upon her. The fabric was naturally good, but the colors were either too bright, making her complexion look even more sallow, or the patterns were too elaborate. Worn on her frail body, they looked completely out of place, like a child sneaking into an adult's clothes. I also thoughtfully gave her some beaded and silk flowers that I didn't like much, and whose styles were out of date. Every time she accepted them, She acted overjoyed, with tears in her eyes. "Thank you, sister. You are so good to Loran." But when she turned to leave, I could always catch the flash of humiliation and resentment in the depths of her eyes. What does the female supporting character mean? Deliberately giving Lely old clothes? Is she showing off? Those colors and patterns don't suit Lela at all. She is doing it on purpose. Scheming bitch! Lela's still so grateful to her. She is really too kind. Hope the male lead quickly discovers the female supporting character's true colors. Secretly, Shalaran also began making frequent little moves. She soon figured out the approximate time Chiyu came to my courtyard to visit every day. So, when Chiyu came, he would always accidentally run into Shalaran sweeping fallen leaves in the courtyard, or squatting in the corner feeding stray cats. She wouldn't take the initiative to step forward. Seeing Chiyu from afar, she would stand up in a panic like a startled fawn, curtsy timidly, and then walk away quickly with her head lowered, leaving behind a frail, helpless figure that yet held a hint of stubbornness. Once or twice, Chiyu might not have paid it any mind, but as it happened more often, combined with that deliberately crafted, pity-inducing air of Shalaran's, that didn't match her age, it finally caught Chiyu's attention, especially when I unintentionally mentioned, "Cousin Laran is truly diligent, always rushing to help the servants with work, saying she feels uneasy eating and living here for free." The look in Chiyu's eyes when he looked at Shalaran's retreating figure thus held a few more shades of complex pity. On this day, the estate held a small flower viewing banquet, inviting the wives and daughters of several families we were close with. Mother, thinking that Shalaran was new to the capital, allowed her to attend as well, to let her see the world. Shalaran had obviously dressed up with care, wearing that best yet still ill-fitting light pink dress I had bestowed upon her, her hair combed neatly, wearing the beaded flower I gave her, amidst a crowd of officials' daughters in magnificent attire and sparkling jewelry. Her outfit appeared even more shabby and out of place. The gazes several young ladies cast toward her all carried a subtle sense of scrutiny and disdain. Shalaran kept her head down, her fingers tightly twisting the hem of her clothes, looking extremely ill at ease. As the young lady of the host family, I naturally had to circulate among them. I pulled Shalaran along, introducing her to the young ladies one by one. "This is my cousin Loran, who has come from afar." For my sake, the ladies reluctantly nodded as a greeting, but the aloofness in their eyes was obvious. Shalaran's voice was faint, and her bowing movements carried a rustic clumsiness, drawing a few very quiet snickers. I saw the roots of her ears turn red, and her fingernails almost digging into her palms. Halfway through the banquet, the young ladies played pitch-pot in the garden. Shalaran shrank into the corner, not daring to step forward. A young lady from the censor's family, who didn't get along well with us, deliberately raised her voice. "Hey, Cousin Loran, why aren't you coming to play? Could it be you look down on our game? Or is it that you never played it in the countryside and don't know how?" These words caused several young ladies to cover their mouths and snicker. Shalaran's face instantly flushed red, and the rims of her eyes reddened too. She looked on the verge of tears, delicate and pitiful. I was just about to speak up to help her out. Chiyu had walked over at some point. He obviously saw what just happened. His brows furrowed slightly as he walked to Shalaran's side, his tone carrying a hint of displeasure. "It is just a game. Why force someone against their will? Cousin Loran has just arrived, so it is only natural she isn't familiar with it." Seeing that it was the heir speaking, that young lady from the censor's family curled her lip and said nothing more. Chiyu lowered his head and said gently to Shalaran, "No need to be afraid. If you want to play, I'll teach you." Shalaran looked up, gazing at Chiyu with teary eyes, her eyes filled with gratitude and reliance, and nodded gently. The male lead appeared, hero saving the beauty. Aha! I ship them so hard. This is the official pairing. Look how gentle the heir is to Lely. In comparison, what was Sha Xiling doing just now? Watching a joke? Truly vicious. "Lely, don't cry. Brother Heir is here. I watched this scene, feeling absolutely nothing in my heart, even wanting to laugh a little. What a show of mutual affection and a hero saving the beauty. It is a pity. They're singing the tune a bit too early. I walked forward, wearing just the right amount of surprise and innocence on my face. Brother Heir, you've come at just the right time. Cousin Loran just arrived, so she doesn't understand many of the rules yet. Games like pitch-pot place the utmost importance on deportment and rules. If the posture is inelegant, missing the target is a small matter. But if others laugh at our Shah family ladies for not knowing etiquette, that would be bad. I turned to Shah Loran, my smile affectionate. Cousin, why not learn the basic etiquette postures from me first, to avoid making a joke of yourself when you go out in the future? My words seemed like concern, but in reality, every sentence was pointing out Shah Loran's lack of rules and lowly background. Shah Loran's face instantly turned from red to white. Chiyu's expression was a bit grim too, but he couldn't refute my words, because the etiquette of a lady from a noble family is indeed important. He could only say in a deep voice, Sister Ling is right, then I'll have to trouble you to give Cousin Loran some guidance. After saying that, he glanced at Shah Loran with a look of reassurance, then turned and left. Shah Loran lowered her head, her fingernails digging deeply into her flesh. I knew that this cup of tea of hers had gone completely sour. After the flower viewing banquet, Shah Loran behaved herself for a few days. But I knew that with her personality, she would never willingly swallow this silent loss. She began to inadvertently reveal her hardships in the countryside when Chiyu came to see me. For example, she would accidentally knock over the tea, then look at the water stain on the floor, muttering to herself. Back in the countryside, if I spilled water, the master would punish me by making me go without food. For example, when Chiyu and I were talking, she would hold a tattered copy of the three-character classic and read softly in the corridor, quietly wiping away tears when she reached certain sentences. When Chiyu asked, she replied with red-rimmed eyes, "It is nothing. I just remembered when Mother was alive, she also taught Loran to read. It is a pity. Mother passed away early, and Loran is dull. There are many characters I don't recognize. I've made a fool of myself in front of Brother Heir." She never directly says I treat her harshly, but uses these bits and pieces to constantly reinforce her image as a lonely and helpless, bullied poor little thing, contrasting against the coldness and happiness of me, the pampered legitimate sister. The look Chiyu gave me gradually held a bit more imperceptible scrutiny and dissatisfaction. He seems to have started believing that I, this glamorous fiancé, might really be freezing out this poor cousin in private. Lely is too pitiful, constantly living in memories of suffering. The female supporting character definitely bullied Lely. Look at that scared look on Lely's face. Male lead, hurry up and see the female supporting character's true colors. Save Lely from this misery soon. That day, after Chiyu left, Shah Loran came to my room carrying a plate of crude-looking pastries she had made herself. Sister, these are some rustic country pastries I made myself. It is a small token to thank you for taking care of me during this time. Her smile was meek, yet her eyes held a hint of provocation. I looked at the unwashed flour under her fingernails, and the irregular shape of the pastry's edges, gave a faint smile, and reached out to pick one up. It is very thoughtful of you, sister. I made a motion to take a bite, but suddenly my hand slipped. Splat. The pastry fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. Oh my, I cried out, looking apologetically at Shah Loran, whose face had gone stiff. Forgive me, sister. My hand slipped. It seems I don't have the good fortune to enjoy your kindness. I watched her gaze instantly darken as I unhurriedly picked up my handkerchief to wipe my hands, my tone gentle yet barbed. It is just, sister, since you've entered our Shah manor, you really ought to change some of those country habits. Take these pastries. For instance, the ingredients, the heat control, the presentation, it is all about refinement. If we used snacks like these to serve guests, I am afraid people would laugh at our Shah family for not knowing proper hospitality. Shalaran bit down hard on her lower lip, almost biting until it bled. She jerked her head up, her eyes filled with a venom she could no longer hide. Though it flashed by in an instant, I saw it clearly. She quickly lowered her head again, her voice choked with sobs. Yes, Laren understands. Thank you for the lesson, elder sister. After saying that, she practically ran out of my room. I knew that this thorn had already sunk deep into her heart. She wouldn't let this go. And I was waiting for her to make her move. The scent of Shalaran's tea hadn't yet faded, but the real storm had already revealed its hideous omens. It was an afternoon, and I was leaning against the window flipping through a book of miscellaneous notes. The sunlight fell warmly upon me, almost making me forget the turbulent undercurrents within this estate. Suddenly, the familiar gilded gold hue appeared before my eyes again. Unlike the scattered complaints from before, the handwriting this time carried a near-excited tone of spoilers. It is coming, it is coming. The plot point is here. Get ready, sisters? The male lead can't take it anymore. The female side character keeps hogging the position and bullying our Lele. He has to teach her a lesson. Big news, insider spoiler, in half a month at the Marquise Genbei's birthday banquet, the male lead plans to make his move. Specific plan, while the guests are gathered, set it up so the female side character accidentally falls into the water in full view of everyone, and ideally have some strange man coincidentally save her. Once her reputation is ruined, the engagement is sure to be toast. Wow, thrilling. Now the female side character is completely done for. Let's see how arrogant she can be now. Then the male lead can break off the engagement, as a matter of course, and bring back our poor Lela. The fake childhood sweetheart script is officially starting. Can't wait for the birthday banquet. Hurry up and get to that day. I can't wait to see the female side character's reputation completely ruined. Lines of text scrolled past quickly, carrying undisguised malice and anticipation. My fingers gripping the page tightened slightly, my knuckles turning white. Although I had expected it, seeing this naked scheming with my own eyes, the cold hatred in the depths of my heart still surged like a venomous snake, nearly breaking through my reason. Push me into the water, ruin my reputation. Chiyu, you really are just as vicious as ever. For the sake of those shady motives of yours, you'd actually use a woman's most cherished innocence as a pawn. Good. Very good. I took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the surging emotions, a cold glint in my eyes. Since you've laid down the gauntlet, how could I not accept? However, as for who falls into this pond water, that won't be up to you anymore. For the next half-month, I acted exceptionally docile. Every day, aside from paying respects to my parents, I was either recuperating in my own courtyard or intently practicing needlework and painting, looking for all the world like a picture of peaceful serenity. Towards Chiyu, I remained that wholehearted, dependent, naive sister Ling, completely oblivious to the irritability and probing he occasionally let slip. Towards Xiaolaran, I kept up a surface-level politeness, occasionally rewarding her with some flashy but useless items, watching her force herself to endure the humiliation, and thank me, then secretly make eyes at Chiyu. I just treated it like watching a show. In secret, however, my plans were in full swing. First was swimming. Using the excuse that the dampness by the water in spring is heavy, and my old illness might relapse, I asked Mother for a favor to hire a retired palace matron who was skilled in swimming, bringing her into the manor legitimately to teach me breathing techniques to strengthen my body. In reality, it was to secretly train hard in swimming, having been one of the living dead for 10 years in my past life. In this life, I cherish this healthy body more than anyone. Coupled with an adult's comprehension, within just 10 days, I was already able to nimbly hold my breath and dive in the water. Secondly, is the location. In the garden of the Marquis of Genbei's manor, there were 2 ponds, one big and one small. The big pond was near the main courtyard used for entertaining guests. The water rippled beautifully, and the view was open. The small pond was in a secluded spot near an abandoned side courtyard. Rumor had it there were undercurrents beneath the surface, so hardly anyone went there. The bullet comments only said, "falling into the water," but didn't specify which pond. Given Chi-Yu's caution and viciousness, he is bound to choose a secluded little pond. It ensures success and makes it easy for him to arrange for a strange man to coincidentally pass by. And this plays right into my hands. Finally, the most important link, Cheon-jo. This bastard ignored by everyone is the most critical piece in my plan. I found an excuse to send my personal maid to accidentally pass by that dilapidated courtyard where Cheon-jo lived, and carelessly leave behind a miscellany book about local customs and scenery. Inside the book, there happened to be a page describing the characteristics of a certain underwater undercurrent, and how to deal with it. Beside it was a note I had unintentionally written: "If encountered, do not struggle. Follow the flow to remain unharmed." A few days later, the maid reported back that the book was picked up by Cheon-jo. After another few days, I went for a walk near the small pond and bumped into Cheon-jo, who was quietly spacing out by the lake. He was a bit thinner than before, but his back was straight, and his gaze remained calm. He walked over, stopped not far from him, and looked at the pond water, as if talking to myself, yet also speaking for his benefit. "This water looks calm, but I hear there are turbulent undercurrents beneath. You really can't judge by appearances. If someone were to lose their footing and fall in, without knowing how to swim, I am afraid their chances would be slim." His body stiffened almost imperceptibly. He didn't turn back, but I knew he heard me. I didn't say anything more and turned to leave. I believed that with his intelligence, he would surely understand my hint and show up where he was supposed to appear. Half a month passed in a flash. On the day of the Marquis of Genbei's birthday banquet, the manor was decorated with lanterns and festoons, and guests filled the gates. In the front courtyard, the sound of gongs and drums filled the sky. A high stage was set up, and the scene was extraordinarily lively. Most of the female guests gathered in the warm pavilions and waterside kiosks of the back garden to admire flowers, sip tea, and listen to music. I was wearing a brand new primrose-colored silk skirt with a scattered flower pattern, and the ruby head ornaments my mother had newly bestowed upon me. Dressed to look bright and stunning, I chatted and laughed happily with a few familiar young ladies from official families, responding with perfect propriety. I knew there were plenty of eyes sizing me up from the shadows. There was envy, jealousy, and also scrutiny scrutinizing me, the legitimate daughter of the Shah family, who was about to come of age, and was betrothed to the heir of the Marquis of Genbei. As the heir, Chi-Yu naturally had to entertain the male guests in the front courtyard, but he would occasionally find an excuse to come to the back garden to greet the sons of family friends. Every time he came over, his gaze would always inadvertently sweep over me, his expression complex, carrying a kind of resolute coldness. Shah Laran had also dressed up meticulously today, wearing a new water-green dress. The fabric was ordinary, but the color brought out a fresh look in her. She followed quietly behind a few young ladies of low status, looking submissive, but I knew her peripheral vision was glued to Chi-Yu the whole time. The subtitles in the air were as active as dumplings in a boiling pot. "Countdown, countdown, the exciting moment is coming." The female supporting character is still smiling. "Just wait, she won't even be able to cry later." The male lead's eyes were so cold looking at the female supporting character just now. Looks like he has made up his mind. Everything is ready, just waiting for the show to start. Lella, don't worry. After today, everything will be fine. I lifted my teacup, using the rising steam to hide the cold curve of my lips. Yes, the show is about to begin. Halfway through the banquet, as expected, a little maid quietly came over and whispered in my ear, "Miss, The heir invites you to the pavilion by the small pond for a chat. He says there is an important matter to discuss. Here it comes. I sneered in my heart, but my face showed just the right amount of surprise, and a hint of shyness as I said to the young ladies beside me, "Brother heir is looking for me. I'll be right back." Under the smiling, teasing gazes of several young ladies, I took my personal maid and walked unhurriedly towards that remote little pond. The closer we got to the pond, the fewer people there were. The spring sunshine was just right, the pond water emerald green, and the weeping willows along the bank swayed gently, making it look peaceful and serene. Sure enough, Chiyu was already waiting in the pavilion. He was wearing a sapphire blue brocade robe today, setting off his face to look even more handsome, only there was a layer of lingering gloom shrouded between his brows. Seeing me approach, he squeezed out a smile. "Sister Ling, you've come." I walked into the pavilion, feigning curiosity. "Brother Shizi, what did you seek me out for? It is strangely quiet here." Chiyu's gaze swept over my maid. I took the hint and said to the maid, "Go keep watch over there. Don't let anyone come near." The maid complied and retreated a dozen steps away, where she could see the pavilion, but couldn't hear our conversation clearly. Only Chiyu and I remained in the pavilion. The smile on his face vanished instantly, replaced by a cold scrutiny and undisguised disgust. "Xia Zhailing." He called me by my full name, his voice pitched extremely low. "You don't need to pretend anymore." Alarm bells rang loudly in my heart, but my expression became even more innocent, even tinged with a bit of grievance. "Brother Shizi, what do you mean?" "Linger doesn't understand." "Don't understand," he sneered, stepping forward to close in on me. "Do you really think I don't know what you are plotting? Did you really think I was blind to those things you did to Loran? He is doing this to deliberately provoke me, creating a false impression of conflict." I played along, my eyes reddening, looking as if I were about to cry. "Brother Shizi, how could you wrong me like this? Heaven and earth can testify to how I treat cousin Loran. Is it? Did she say something to you?" "She didn't say a word," Chiyu growled, his eyes ruthless. "But I know exactly how much she has been wronged. Xia Zhailing, you've occupied this position for too long. You don't deserve it at all." As he spoke, he suddenly reached out and shoved my shoulder hard. No, I was already poised and ready. The instant his palm touched my clothes, I didn't resist hard. Instead, I stumbled backward with his force, while my feet seemingly hooked and tripped in a panic. "Ah," I let out a short gasp. Chiyu clearly didn't expect I would resist, let alone the sudden force at his feet. He used too much force, and his body instantly lost balance. "You." A trace of shock and panic flashed through his eyes. He tried to grab something, but only caught air. As for me, amidst my panic, I coincidentally grabbed the pavilion pillar and steadied myself. In a split second, our positions were swapped. I, who was supposed to be pushed into the water, clung to the pillar, still reeling from the shock, while Chiyu, who had pushed so hard, screamed amidst a flurry of flailing limbs splash. A loud bang, water splashing everywhere. He fell right into the icy pond. What happened? How come the male lead is the one who fell in? What did the female side character do? The floating subtitles were flooded with a string of exclamation marks and question marks, full of disbelief and panic. "Help. Say glug glug." Chiyu thrashed violently in the water, clearly unable to swim. The icy water choked his nose and mouth, leaving him in a sorry state. I hugged the pillar tightly, my face scared deathly pale, and shouted with a trembling voice laced with sobs. "Help! Someone come quick, brother heir has fallen into the water!" Almost simultaneously, a thin, small figure darted out from behind the rockery, like an arrow, and jumped into the pond without hesitation. It was Qianzhou. He was an excellent swimmer, and upon entering the water, he quickly swam towards the struggling Chiyu. And just then, the guests, startled by my cries for help and the sound of the splash, also came rushing over. Rushing at the very front were the livid Marquis of Genbei and my parents. The scene everyone saw was, by the pavilion. My clothes were slightly disheveled, and I was hugging a pillar, weeping in shock. In the pond, Chiyanzhou was struggling to drag the dying Chiyu towards the shore. As for Chiyu, in the chaotic splashing, his forehead seemed to have smashed heavily against a rockery stone at the bottom of the pond, gushing out a streak of bright red blood, and he immediately passed out. The scene was dead silent. All eyes were focused on me and the unconscious Chiyu in the water. Male lead. How could this happen? The plot has completely collapsed. It is the female supporting character. It must be the female supporting character behind this. What about Lele? What about our pseudo-childhood sweetheart? The bullet screen went completely crazy. I let go of the pillar. My legs went soft, and I slumped to the ground, tears gushing out. Pointing at the pond, I choked out between sobs. Lord Marquis' father, mother, brother, heir, he somehow, his foot slipped, and just fell in. I lifted my teary eyes to look at the Marquis of Genbei, who was rushing over, my gaze filled with lingering fear and innocence. I tried to pull him back, but I couldn't hold on. When Chiyu was fished out, blood was trickling from his temple, his face was as pale as gold paper, and he had already passed out cold. Marquis Genbei, Qi Zheng, rushed forward in a single stride, squatting down to check his son's condition. He felt icy cold to the touch, and blood seeping from the wound on his forehead, mixed with the pond water, a shocking sight. He jerked his head up, his gaze like lightning, shooting first at me, who was slumped on the ground, shivering uncontrollably. What exactly is going on? The Marquis's voice carried a suppressed rage, like a volcano about to erupt. Bloodshed at a birthday banquet, the heir falling into the water and falling unconscious. This was a massive bad omen and a scandal. I shuddered at his roar, tears streaming down even harder. Looking terrified, I cried incoherently. Marquis, I don't know. Brother heir called me over, said he had something to say. Then he seemed to lose his balance, slipped, and fell in. I tried to pull him, couldn't hold on. Boo-hoo-hoo, I cried earnestly, my shoulders trembling incessantly, enacting the image of a frail woman, overly frightened and overwhelmed with guilt, to perfection. You are lying. A shrill cry tore through the heavy atmosphere. Shalaran squeezed out from the crowd, threw herself to Chiyu's side, wanting to touch him but not daring to. She lifted her tear-stained face, pointed a trembling finger at me, her voice carrying a bone-deep resentment. Marquise, it was her. It must have been her who pushed the heir into the water. I saw long ago that she was jealous of how well the heir treats me. She harbored venom in her heart. That is why she committed such a vicious act. Her words were like a stone thrown into a still lake, instantly stirring up 1,000 waves. The look in the eyes of the guests present instantly turned subtle, and the sound of whispering rose up like the buzzing of gnats. Could such a thing be true? Miss Xia looks so gentle. Surely she wouldn't go that far. Hard to say. You know a person's face but not their heart. And this cousin doesn't look like she is lying. Fighting over a man out of jealousy and causing such a scene. It is really... Yes. Lele is right. It was the female side character who pushed him. Lele is so brave. Expose her true colors. Marquis, hurry and believe Lele. The female side character is acting. The floating subtitles started noisily supporting Shalaran again. The Marquis of Genbei furrowed his brows tightly, his gaze shifting between me and Shalaran, clearly finding it hard to judge for the moment. He was naturally more inclined to believe his son had fallen into the water by accident. But Shalaran's accusation was so sharp. Laran! My father, Sha Mingyuan, looked grim as he shouted in a deep voice. Stop talking nonsense! How could Linger do such a thing? Without proof or evidence, how can you slander your sister? Although he was also shocked and suspicious, his priority was to protect his daughter's reputation. I am not spouting nonsense. Shalaran looked as though she had thrown caution to the wind, crying out, Marquise, please see the truth. Brother Eyre treats people with kindness. How could he have slipped and fallen for no reason? It must be this woman acting out of jealous hatred. She makes things difficult for me every day. If Brother Eyre treats me even slightly well, she mocks and ridicules me. Today she must have seen Brother Eyre looking for me to talk, grew resentful, and committed this vicious act. Her words were half true and half false, linking my previous picking on her with Chiyu's defense of her. Surprisingly, it actually sounded somewhat logical. I sneered in my heart, but my face showed disbelief, sadness, and grievance. I looked at Shalaran with teary eyes. Cousin Laran, how could you spew such venomous slander? I believe I've treated you well, so why would you frame me like this? Brother Eyre had an accident, and I am sadder than anyone. Yet I choked up and couldn't go on, just looking helplessly at my parents and Marquis Janbei. Marquis. I took a deep breath, forced myself to calm down, and began to state the facts logically, though my voice was still choked with sobs. Every word was clear. At the time, only Brother Shizi and I were in the pavilion. Brother Shizi asked me to meet him here, saying he wanted to discuss the matter of breaking off the engagement. I dropped the words "break off the engagement" like a bolt from the blue, stunning everyone into a daze. The Marquis of Genbei's pupils constricted slightly. I continued. Brother Eyre said his heart belongs to another, and he didn't wish to hold me back. He hoped I would take the initiative to break off the engagement, to fulfill his wish. I glanced at Shalaran with perfect timing, my expression complicated. I couldn't accept it in the moment, and argued a few words with Brother Eyre. Brother Eyre was perhaps too agitated. When he stood up, he accidentally tripped over the stone stool in the pavilion, which is why he lost his footing and fell. I tried to reach out to pull him back, but it was too late. If the Marquis does not believe me, you can check if the stone stool in the pavilion shows signs of being moved, and also ask the servant boy attending Brother Eyre whether he has been frequently acting troubled of late. My explanation spun, pushing him into an accident during a dispute, and highlighted the key points that Chiyu had his heart set on another, and was the one asking to call off the engagement. This not only explained the reason for the dispute, but also painted Chiyu as in the wrong and emotionally unstable. A lovesick, agitated young man slipping and falling into the water during an argument sounds way more plausible than a fiancé killing out of jealousy. More importantly, I hinted that the one Chiyu had his heart set on might just be Shalaran. So Shalaran's accusation right now took on the suspicion of being a frame-up for love. Sure enough, the way everyone looked at Shalaran instantly changed. Shalaran's face went deadly pale, and she shrieked, "You are lying! How could Brother Eyre?" "Shut up!" The Marquis of Genbei suddenly cut her off sternly, his eyes cold as a veteran of officialdom. How could he not hear the hidden implications in my words? Compared to an accusation from a distant cousin of unknown origin, the explanation given by me, a fiancé with a clean family background, of an accidental fall during a lover's spats, obviously did more to preserve the face of the Marquise's manner, and also gave the situation a relatively graceful way out. If it were confirmed that I pushed him, then the air of the Marquise's manner being harmed by his fiancée would simply be a massive joke. He stopped looking at Shalaran and turned a sharp gaze toward Qi Yanzhou, who had been silent the whole time. "Yanzhou, you were nearby? Did you see or hear anything?" Everyone's eyes instantly focused on this unremarkable youth. Qi Yanzhou raised his head, wet hair plastered against his forehead, yet his gaze was unusually calm. He looked at the unconscious Chiyu, then at me, and finally toward Marquis Janbei, speaking in a voice that was not loud but clearly audible. Answering father, your son was behind the rockery at the time. Studying, I heard the sound of an argument in the pavilion. It seemed to be Brother Eyre saying, "Must cancel the engagement. Stop pestering me." Then I heard the sound of falling into the water and Miss Ya calling for help. Your son didn't have time to think, so I jumped into the water to save them. His words perfectly corroborate my story. They confirm the key points of the argument and the broken engagement. This bastard is spouting nonsense. He is in cahoots with the female side character. It is over. It is over. The male lead can't clear his name now. The bullet comments were seething with rage. The Marquis of Genbei's face was so gloomy it could drip water. Qianzhou's testimony, combined with my earlier words, practically nailed the accidental slip narrative shut. He glared fiercely at the unconscious Qiyu, clearly furious at his failure to live up to expectations, causing such a scandal over a woman. "Marquis," my mother spoke up at just the right moment, her tone filled with heartache and dissatisfaction. "It seems this matter was indeed an accident. It is just that child brother Yu sigh, since he had other intentions. He could have just said so clearly. Why forceling like this and nearly cause a catastrophe? Regarding today's events, my Shah family daughter has suffered such fright and slander. We still need the Marquis to give us justice." Her words not only set the narrative, but also took the opportunity to demand an explanation for me, putting Xiaoluran right over the fire. The Marquis of Genbei took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing his rage, and said in a deep voice, "Madam Shah, rest assured, this Marquis will definitely investigate this matter thoroughly and give your noble manor an explanation." He glanced at Xiaoluran, his eyes cold as ice. "As for this woman spouting nonsense, slandering her legitimate sister, and stirring up trouble, it seems my Marquis manor can no longer keep you. Men, take her away, guard her strictly, and await punishment later." Xiaoluran looked as if she had been struck by lightning. She slumped to the ground, crying and shouting, "Marquise, I am wrongly accused. It was she who harmed Brother Eyre." But no one paid her any mind. Two burly servant women stepped forward and dragged her away without a hint of politeness. "Lally, the Marquise is old and muddled. I am so pissed off. The male and female leads are being bullied to death." The imperial physician hurried over at this moment. After some diagnosis and treatment, he replied, "Lord Marquis, the heir choked on water and suffered a blow to the head, leading to a coma. His life should not be in danger, but he needs to rest quietly for a period of time. As for when he will wake up, and if there will be any aftereffects, that still needs observation." A birthday banquet ended in a chaotic scene with the heir seriously injured and in a coma, and the distant cousin being detained. Although the Marquis of Genbei tried his best to suppress it, the news that the heir accidentally fell into the water while arguing with his fiancé to break off the engagement still quietly spread within a small circle. Chiyu's reputation for being impulsive, willful, and acting thoughtlessly was considered initially damaged. And I, in everyone's eyes, was the innocent fiancé who had suffered a massive grievance. Chiyu had to lie in bed for half a month before he could get up. He could move around now, but near the hairline on the corner of his forehead, a light pink scar about an inch long remained. It looked like a twisted centipede, ruining the perfection of his whole face. The imperial physician said that this scar probably couldn't be completely removed, for the proud, arrogant heir of the Marquis of Genbei, who cared extremely about his appearance. This was undoubtedly a humiliating disgrace. I heard that after he woke up, he learned the ins and outs of the whole matter from his trusted servant boy naturally, the version I had carefully orchestrated. He got into an argument with me over breaking off the engagement, got emotional and accidentally fell into the water, and Xiaoluran tried to implicate me but was reprimanded and detained. Instead, he smashed everything within reach right then and there. Bottles and jade vessels shattered all over the floor, and his roaring could be heard even across the courtyard. He hated me for being cunning, hated Shalaran for being stupid, and hated that meddlesome bastard Qianzhou even more. He absolutely refused to believe it was some kind of bullshit accident. It must have been that bitch Xia Zhailing's doing. The male lead is so pitiful, getting his face ruined by the female supporting character. This hatred is irreconcilable. The female supporting character must die. Male lead get well soon and find a way to kill her. The subtitles in the air were full of heartache and incitement. This overwhelming hatred turned into action on the very first day he could get out of bed. He came to my courtyard. At that time, I was sitting under the crabapple tree in the courtyard embroidering. Sunlight filtered through the flowers and leaves, casting fragmented, dappled light on my pale blue skirt. Hearing footsteps, I looked up and saw Qiyu walking over against the light. He had lost some weight, and his face was still a bit pale, but that scar added a touch of sinister gloom to him. However, the moment he saw me, all the negative emotions on his face were cleanly concealed, replaced by a faint smile filled with guilt and tenderness. Sister Ling. His voice was gentle, as if all the previous unpleasantness had never occurred. I put down the embroidery hoop and stood up, my face revealing surprise and a hint of unease at just the right moment. Brother Shizi, you are fully recovered. Why did you come over personally? It should have been me visiting you. It is fine, I've been lying down for a long time, just came out for a walk. He walked up to me, his gaze falling on my face, carrying a few shades of complex scrutiny, but it quickly turned into sincere apology. Sister Ling, I've come to apologize to you. He sighed, his tone pained. The other day, it was Big Brother's fault. My mind was clouded. I said those bastard things, did stupid things, and even dragged you into it and scared you, getting slandered. He cleverly avoided the name, Xialaran. My falling into the water was truly an accident. It had nothing to do with you. Lying in bed these past few days, I've thought a lot. He looked at me, his gaze deeply affectionate. You and I have an engagement set since childhood, by the order of parents and the words of matchmakers, and even more a match made in heaven. How could I give up so lightly just because of a moment of confusion? Sister Ling, can you forgive Big Brother? He spoke with such sincerity. If I hadn't returned via rebirth and known the viciousness beneath his skin, I almost would have believed him. The male lead is so kind. He is even apologizing to the female side character. He must be forced. It is to placate this vicious woman. Boo-hoo-hoo! Our heir is being wronged! I lowered my lashes, fingers twisting my handkerchief, acting out a moved yet somewhat hesitant look. Brother heir, please don't say that. As long as you are okay, those things are all in the past. I knew Sister Ling was the most forgiving. Chiyu's smile deepened as he took an exquisite food box from the servant behind him and opened it. Inside were a few pieces of sweet-smelling osmanthus cake. This is fresh osmanthus cake from the kitchen. I remember you love sweets. He picked up a piece and held it out before me, his eyes so tender they could drip water. Have a taste. Just consider it. Big Brother making it up to you. The osmanthus cake looked tempting and smelled fragrant, but I keenly caught that the instant his fingertips touched the pastry, there was an extremely faint, almost imperceptible strange scent masked by the rich fragrance of osmanthus. I sneered inwardly. Here it comes. I knew it, a weasel paying a New Year's call to a chicken doesn't harbor good intentions. This pastry has definitely been spiked with something. It isn't deadly poison, that would be too obvious. Most likely, it is some dirty drug that makes one itch all over and break out in red rashes. It would make me suffer and make a fool of myself without being fatal, and he could still wash his hands of it. Pastries made in the kitchen. Who knows at which step something went wrong. I raised my eyes to meet his sincere gaze, a flattered, slightly silly smile blooming on my face. Thank you, Brother Shizi. You still remember I love eating this. I reached out my hand, making a motion to take it. A glint of satisfaction from a successful scheme, and disdain flashed in Chiyu's eyes. Just as my fingertips were about to touch the pastry, I suddenly cried out, "Oops!" And as if my grip had slipped, my handkerchief accidentally fell to the ground. "Look at me, so clumsy." I smiled apologetically and used the motion to bend down and pick up the handkerchief. This movement neatly avoided the pastry he was handing over. As I stood up, with a slight blush on my face, my gaze shyly swept over his forehead, and I said softly, "Brother Shizi, the injury on your forehead, does it still hurt? I have some scar healing gel awarded from the palace. It works wonders. Shall I have someone send some over to you?" My words, seemingly out of concern, actually poked precisely at his sore spot. The smile on Chiyu's face instantly stiffened, and the tenderness in his eyes was replaced by a sinister look. Although it was only for a split second, the hand holding the pastry trembled ever so slightly. He hated it most when people mentioned that scar. "Number, there is no need." He practically gritted his teeth as he said this, and he awkwardly retracted the hand holding the pastry. "Oh," I nodded as if I understood, but didn't quite get it, still looking at him innocently. Then this pastry. Chiyu looked at the osmanthus cake in his hand, neither able to throw it away nor keep it. He certainly wouldn't eat it himself. Just as he was in this awkward spot, I suddenly looked toward the courtyard gate and called out in pleasant surprise, "Father, what brings you here?" Chiyu subconsciously looked back. The moment he turned his head, I quickly reached out, using my handkerchief as cover, and swiftly swapped the osmanthus cake in his hand with another untouched one from my food box. The movement was so fast it happened in a split second. Chiyu turned back around. There was no one at the courtyard entrance. "Huh? I thought I saw father just now. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me." I stuck out my tongue embarrassedly. Chiyu frowned, suppressing his suspicion. At this moment, he had no desire to keep acting, and just wanted to leave as soon as possible. He shoved the whole food box into my hands. "You keep the cakes and take your time eating them. I am still feeling a bit unwell, so I'll go back and rest first." After saying that, he practically fled in a panic, watching his retreating figure fleeing in panic. The smile on my face grew cold. I picked up the osmanthus cake from the box, the one his fingertips had touched. The one likely spiked walked to the corner of the wall, crumbled it, and mixed it into the soil. Then I picked up the untouched one and took a light bite. So sweet. "Chiyu, your methods are still so underhanded, but the more you hate me, the more you can't hold back, the happier I am. Because I know that the day you bring about your own destruction isn't far off." In the air, new subtitles quietly emerged. "The male lead's look is off, feels like he is gonna turn dark. Must have been pissed off by the female supporting lead." Preview, "The male lead seems to be wandering around the corner tower again. Is he trying to... Could it be that the male lead wants to do it again? It must succeed this time." I looked at that line of hints regarding the corner tower, and the corners of my lips slowly curled up. Yes, the corner tower. That is the place where our grievances will truly come to an end. "I'll be waiting for you." Not many days after the fuss over Chiyu's apology had passed, his personal page boy sneakily delivered a note. There was no signature, only a line of familiar handwriting that was somewhat deliberately scrawled. 3/4 into the hour of the rooster, meet at the corner tower, return old items. We're even from then on. Old items refers to that piece of mutton fat white jade pendant I relentlessly pestered him to accept when I was 5, carved with a clumsy, auspicious cloud pattern. He had been incredibly disdainful, but I treated it like a treasure, thinking I had established a token of love. In my previous life, after I woke up at 18, I had foolishly asked him for it, but he sneered at me, saying he didn't know which corner he'd thrown it into long ago. Later, I learned he had turned around and given it to Shalaran, who casually hung it by her bed as a toy. In this life, he actually wants to use this as bait. I pinched the note, looking out the window at that abandoned corner tower, where part of the scaffolding was already being dismantled, and felt a chill in the depths of my heart. He knew that was the turning point of my fate, and also the place where his obsession began. He wants to thoroughly end me there. The subtitles in the air excitedly flooded the screen. It is here, the ultimate plot point. The male lead is finally making his move. Corner tower showdown. This time it must succeed. Send the female side character to her doom. Using the jade pendant as bait, the male lead is smart. A lovesick fool like the female side character will definitely take the bait. I slowly brought the note close to the candle flame, watching it curl, blacken, and turn to ash. Yes, I will go. If I don't go, how can I do justice to this death trap you've so meticulously arranged? At 3/4 into the hour of the rooster, the setting sun dyed the sky a desolate, vibrant orange-red. All alone, I stepped onto the creaking wooden ladder leading to the corner tower. Some parts of the stairs were rotten, making a sound that set my teeth on edge when stepped on. The air was filled with the scent of rotting wood and dust. Inside my sleeve, my slender fingertips tightly pinched 3-inch long, cold iron silver needles. These were what I had quietly removed from a discarded phoenix hairpin in my mother's jewelry box, and secretly sharpened. Unassuming, yet sharp enough. On the rooftop platform, the wind was howling. Chi-Yu was indeed waiting there. He stood with his back to me, in front of that railing which had once broken and now looked even more teetering. His posture was upright, yet exuded a desperate resolve to risk it all. Hearing my footsteps, he slowly turned around. The afterglow of the setting sun plated a layer of illusory gold around his body, yet it couldn't shine into the deep, inky darkness at the bottom of his eyes. There was no expression on his face, only a calmness that bordered on cruelty. You came. His voice was low, betraying no emotion. Since Brother Shizi invited me, how could I dare not come? I stopped a few steps away from him, my skirt hem fluttering in the wind. You said you wanted to return an old item? He pulled at the corner of his mouth, revealing an extremely faint, extremely cold smile. He reached into his robes, but didn't take out the jade pendant. Instead, he brought his hand out empty. Sha Xiling. He dropped the disguise, calling me by my full name, his eyes like a poison-dipped knife. There is no one else here. You don't need to act anymore. I looked at him quietly, not saying a word. He took a step forward, closing in on me, his voice carrying unsuppressed hatred and a kind of almost twisted sentimentality. Do you know? What I regret most isn't breaking off the engagement, isn't falling into the water, but that year when you were 8 and fell from this corner tower. Why didn't the fall just kill you outright? His sinister gaze swept over my face, like a venomous snake flicking its tongue. If you had died back then, Laren would have rightfully returned to the Marquise Manor long ago, enjoying everything she deserved. Instead of being like this now, like a rat that can't see the light, being oppressed by you, being locked up and suffering. It is all because of you, you superfluous woman. He got more and more agitated as he spoke, and the scar on his temple turned slightly red from anger. You blocked Laren's way and blocked my way. You should have died long ago. The male lead is so hot. He finally spoke his mind. Did you hear that, female support? You are the one who is unwanted. Hurry up, push her off. I looked at his handsome face, twisted by jealousy and hatred, and suddenly laughed, not out of fear, not out of anger, but a laugh filled with deep mockery and pity. The laughter sounded particularly piercing on the empty rooftop. Chi-Yu froze, seemingly not expecting this reaction from me. What are you laughing at? I stopped laughing and looked up at him, my gaze clear and cold as ice, holding none of the usual timidity or dependence. I am laughing at how pathetic you are, Chi-Yu. You said you regret that I didn't fall to my death back then. I gently shook my head and spoke clearly, word for word. What a coincidence. What I regret most is that back then, I actually shielded an ungrateful, selfish, to the core piece of trash like you from disaster. You? Chiyu was thoroughly enraged by my words, especially the word trash, which ruthlessly stung his arrogant pride. Murderous intent was fully revealed in his eyes. Unable to hold back any longer, he let out a low roar. Go to hell! He suddenly lunged at me, his hands shoving straight toward my chest. His movements were fast and vicious. He intended to push me directly off this 4-jang-high rooftop. Right now, I was already poised and ready. The instant his palm was about to touch me, I didn't retreat. Instead, I turned sideways and stepped forward half a pace to meet him. At the same time, my right hand, hidden in my sleeve all along, shot out like lightning. A cold glint flashed at my fingertips. Aang! Chiyu let out a short, stifled grunt. He just felt a sudden numbness and sharp pain at a spot behind his right elbow. His entire arm instantly went limp and weak, and the force pushing toward me suddenly dissipated by more than half. And I, using the momentum of turning sideways in his forward charge, looked like I was being pushed, stumbling backward by him, but my foot precisely hooked and tripped him. What did you do? Chiyu couldn't exert any strength in his right arm, and with his balance completely lost from my trip, and the inertia of his rush, he plunged forward in horror. And I, amidst a panicked cry, coincidentally, dodged to the side, brushing right past him. In a split second, the tables turned. No! Under Chiyu's terrified gaze, unable to stop his momentum, he slammed violently into that already completely rotten wooden railing. Crack! Crash! A tooth-aching snapping sound rang out. The rotten railing couldn't withstand the force of his impact at all, shattering instantly. Chiyu's figure, accompanied by a scream of despair, plummeted straight down from the top of the 4-jang-high corner tower. The wind whistled in his ears. The last thing he saw was the look in my eyes as I stood at the edge of the roof, looking down at him from above. In that look, there was no panic, no fear, only a bottomless coldness and calm, and my silently moving lips, forming shapes only he could read, softly spitting out a few words. Husband, if you die, I'll just find someone to replace you. Thud! The dull, loud sound of a heavy object hitting the ground came from downstairs. The whole world seemed to fall silent for a moment. The male lead. The one falling is the male lead. What did the female supporting character do? She killed the male lead. The plot has completely collapsed. It is over. The floating subtitles were drowned out by immense shock and panic. A scene of total chaos. I stood on the roof, letting the fierce wind blow my dress and hair. Looking down, it wasn't hard bluestone slabs below, but a pile of soft haystacks and a few scattered sacks that Cheonjo had already arranged. Although they cushioned the impact, a fall from 4-jang-high was definitely not something haystacks could completely neutralize. Chiyu slumped in the pile of grass like a heap of mud, his limbs twisted unnaturally, a dark red stain slowly spreading beneath him. He kept his eyes open, staring at the sky, his gaze filled with extreme fear, pain, and disbelief. He didn't die immediately, but clearly, he couldn't move. I straightened my slightly messy collar and hair, took a deep breath, and my face instantly switched to a panic-stricken, pale-faced expression. Then, using all my strength, I let out an extremely shrill scream. Aha, help, brother. Air has fallen down. My scream pierced the silence of the Marquise's manor at dusk. Almost simultaneously, Cheonjo, who had long been lying in wait nearby, rushed out from the corner as if hearing a signal, threw himself to Chiyu's side, and shouted loudly, Brother, are you okay? Meanwhile, on the other side, several former colleagues my father had arranged to, coincidentally pass by the outer wall of the Marquise's manor, were also conveniently startled by the commotion, and hurriedly banged on the manor's main gate. Footsteps, exclamations, and questioning voices came from far to near, rapidly converging beneath the corner tower. I stood at the top of the tower, watching the crowd rapidly gathering below, watching the panicked figures of Marquis Zhenbei and my parents rushing over, watching Qi Yanzhou's anxious rescue posture, and watching Qi Yu in the haystack, who looked just like a rag doll. I slowly curled the corners of my lips, revealing a cold and cruel smile. Qi Yu, welcome to my hell. Chaos, absolute chaos. My scream was like cold water thrown into boiling oil, instantly exploding through the entire Marquis Zhenbei manor. Servants, guards, masters, and mistresses from the various branches who heard the news. The crowd surged toward the foot of the corner tower like a tide. I slumped on the edge of the cold floorboards, just inches away from the broken railing. I had already secretly loosened my collar, messed up my carefully styled hair, and even used my fingernails to pinch a few suggestive red marks on my neck. The tears falling like beads off a broken string weren't fake. It was hatred, the thrill of revenge, the fear of surviving the ordeal, various emotions intertwined, giving birth to the most real performance. Marquis Zhenbei, Qi Zheng, was the first to rush upstairs, followed by my parents, whose faces were ghastly pale. Seeing that twisted figure in the haystack below, and hearing Qi Yanzhou's sobbing cry, "Big brother, wake up!" This seasoned general's body swayed imperceptibly. He whipped his head around, his blood-red eyes staring dead at me. He strode over in a few steps, his iron pincer-like hands grabbing my frail shoulders, his voice hoarse with rage and fear. "Speak! What happened? How could you fall down?" He used so much force, squeezing me until my bones hurt. I seemed completely terrified by his violent rage, shaking violently all over, tears streaming down even more fiercely, crying and shouting incoherently, "Lord Marquis! Lord Marquis! It has nothing to do with me. It was the heir, brother heir. He asked me to come," he said he wanted to return that old jade pendant to me, to make a clean break. So I came. I panted heavily, as if recalling something extremely terrifying, my eyes darting around in panic. But after he got the jade pendant, suddenly his face changed. He said that as long as the deed was done, I would never have the face to mention breaking off the engagement again. The Xia family, to save face, would definitely force me to marry him. As I spoke, I subconsciously shielded my loosened collar, exposing the red marks on my neck left by the struggle. He lunged at me. I was scared. I struggled desperately, pushed him, bit him, I cried, until I could barely breathe. Then I don't know how. He slipped and crashed through the railing, fell down. Sob, I didn't mean to, Marquise. I really didn't mean to. My story was half true, half false. It is true he asked me out, and it is true he wanted to break it off. The false part is that he forced himself on me. But the motive I gave makes perfect sense. He didn't want the bad reputation of calling off the engagement, and he wanted to get rid of me quickly to marry Xiaolan. Using such dirty tricks to force me to submit isn't impossible for a desperate heir. Besides, my appearance right now, disheveled clothes, tear streaks, and red marks on my neck is the most powerful evidence. Lies, the female supporting character is lying. It was obviously the female supporting character who pushed the male lead down. Vicious, still slandering the male lead at a time like this. The floating subtitles were fuming with rage, yet unable to penetrate the barrier of reality. The Marquis of Zhenbei's grip on my shoulder loosened slightly. He looked at my disheveled state, then at the broken railing, his eyes flickering intensely. He knew his own son. For that Xiaolan, he really might do something extreme. Besides, if the heir slipped and fell while attempting to force himself on someone, although it sounds bad, it is a tiny bit better than the heir being murdered by his fiancé, or falling off for no reason. At least, the main blame could be pushed onto a dead man or a heavily injured man. Marquise! Linger! My mother rushed over, pulling me into her arms, tears falling from heartache as she shouted angrily at the Marquis of Genbei. Marquise! You heard it all! It was the heir. He actually tried to use such despicable means to force himself on my child. Now that he is reaping what he sowed, are you going to blame my humiliated and terrified daughter? My father Xia Mingyuan's face was livid. Although he was skeptical of my story, protecting his daughter and the family's face was the top priority right now. He said in a deep voice, Marquise, the urgent priority is to treat the heir. This matter is full of suspicious points and needs careful investigation. But if the heir really did commit such misconduct, my Xia family will absolutely not let this go. At this moment, covered in grass clippings, Qianzhou rushed upstairs in a hurry. His face was full of anxiety and grief as he said to the Marquis of Genbei, Father, Big Brother is hurt very badly. He is already passed out. The manor doctor said he feared he injured his spine and head. The situation is very grim. He paused, then added, I was downstairs, and it seems I faintly heard the sound of a dispute upstairs, as well as Miss Xia's crying and the heir's angry scolding. This testimony of his was simply a stroke of genius, completely confirming that there was a dispute upstairs. The Marquis of Genbei's body swayed again, his face turning ashen. Qi Yanzhou's words, combined with my miserable state, made it so he had almost no choice but to believe 70 or 80% of it. Unfilial son. That unfilial son. He smashed his fist hard against the pillar beside him, feeling both bitter disappointment that he failed to meet expectations and despair over this unmanageable situation. Seeing the timing was about right, I used up my last bit of strength, lifted my tear-filled eyes to look at the Marquis of Genbei, and said the last sentence with a voice as weak as a thread. Marquis, the jade pendant. He said, even if he destroyed it, he would never give it back to me. Then, my head tilted to the side, and I fainted perfectly into my mother's arms. Linger, my mother's cries of alarm, my father's angry shouts, the Marquis of Genbei's dejected sigh, the chaotic footsteps downstairs, and Chiyu's groans as he was carried away, all wove together into a chaotic symphony. I was carried back to my room in a flurry by my mother and the maids for emergency treatment. And the news about Chiyu, the heir of the Marquis of Genbei, that he attempted to force himself on his fiancé, Xia Jiling, and accidentally fell from a building during the struggle, leaving him gravely injured and on the brink of death, spread rapidly to every corner of the capital, as if it had grown wings, accompanied by what those officials who happened to be passing by that night saw with their own eyes and heard with their own ears public opinion. Overnight, completely flipped. Before Chiyu, falling into the water while arguing to break off the engagement, was only circulated in a small circle, and it even carried a touch of romantic scandal. And this time, attempting to force a marriage, only to end up seriously injured himself, is an absolute scandal. It is moral depravity. It is his own fault. People spat on Chiyu's shamelessness and sympathized with my plight. As for that imprisoned Shalaran, no one cared anymore. She had even become the bane that indirectly caused this tragedy. It is over. It is all over. The male lead is ruined. The female supporting character is so heartless, such vicious tactics. Boo-hoo. I don't believe it. The male lead isn't that kind of person. The floating subtitles were a sea of wailing. I lay on the soft bed, listening to the faint chatter drifting in from outside the window about Chiyu's severe injuries, that he was highly likely to be paralyzed for life, or even become a vegetable, and slowly opened my eyes. His eyes were perfectly clear. There wasn't the slightest sign of unconsciousness. Chiyu's life was forcibly dragged back from the gates of hell by the imperial doctors using precious medicinal herbs. But they merely managed to drag his life back. A fall from a height of 4 zhang, even with a haystack to cushion the blow. The immense impact still shattered several of his vertebrae, and damaged a meridian deep within his skull. He was paralyzed completely and utterly. Below the neck, there was not a shred of feeling left. He couldn't speak. His throat could only make strange he sounds, like a broken bellows. Every day he relied on ginseng soup and liquid food to hang on to life, and even needed someone to wait on him to relieve himself. He was like a puppet that still had consciousness, placed amidst brocade quilts and soft pillows. Only his eyes would occasionally move a little. In the depths of those eyes, it was no longer the arrogance and scheming of the past, but instead turned into bottomless despair, monstrous hatred, and a madness of being abandoned by the whole world. He could hear the imperial doctor shaking his head and sighing, hear his father's suppressed roar, hear the servants' cautious whispers, and perhaps even hear the news about Shah Laran being secretly sent to a nunnery outside the city for quiet cultivation. But he could do nothing. This pain of clearly perceiving everything, yet being unable to move or speak, was crueler than death. I fell, ill having suffered such a great fright and humiliation. It was only natural to fall ill for a spell. I lay in my own fragrant and soft boudoir in the Shah residence, drinking calming soup every day and listening to the latest news brought by my personal maid. Miss, the Marquis looks like he is aged 10 years. His hair has turned mostly white. As for the heir, he is considered completely ruined. The imperial doctor says it is a blessing. He can even lie there like that. The Marquis's residence is a mess right now. The servants are all in a panic. I idly stirred the spoon in the bowl Qijung. The Marquis of Junbei had indeed aged a great deal overnight. His eldest son was ruined, with no hope of inheriting. This almost severed the most orthodox line of his succession. The glory and future of the Marquis's residence were instantly cast under a thick shadow. What gave him an even bigger headache was that the elders of the clan, the advisors in the residence, and even some colleagues in the court who cared about him, began to mention the same thing. Either openly or subtly, the position of heir cannot remain vacant for long. Marquis, it is time to consider the future of the residence. Consider? Consider how? Chiyu is the legitimate eldest son, his status proper and rightful. Now that he is crippled, the Marquis seems to have no other male offspring. But, are there really none? That name deliberately forgotten by everyone began to swirl on the tips of some people's tongues, Qianzhou. That second son, born of a mistress, who existed in the Marquis's manor like an invisible man. It is over. Are they going to remember that bastard? No way. How can the position of heir be given to a mistress's son? The male lead isn't dead yet. You guys can't do this. Marquis, hang in there. Wait for our male lead to get better. The subtitles in the air were filled with panic and unwillingness, but they could not stop the torrent of reality. At first, the Marquis of Junbei was extremely resistant. A mistress's son, of humble status and low birth mother, how could he inherit the title of the Marquis's manor? Wouldn't he become the laughingstock of the entire capital? He might have a trace of meager fatherly affection for Qianzhou, but mostly he viewed him as a stain on his life. He tried to find other ways out. He thought about adopting a clansman with decent aptitude from within the family. But the clansmen of suitable age were either mediocre in aptitude, or their parents were ambitious and hard to control. More importantly, how would His Majesty view an adopted heir? The Marquis of Junbei's manor holds military power, and has always been an existence the emperor needs to balance. The choice of heir is by no means a matter for the Marquis's manor alone. Just as he was overwhelmed with anxiety, some subtle voices began to appear in the court. There were censors who accidentally mentioned that Qianzhou, the second son of Marquis Junbei, though coming from a flawed background, is rumored to be steady in temperament and diligent in his studies. Now that the Marquis's manor is in trouble and in dire need of people, how can a talent be discarded because of his birth? There were also officials on good terms with the Shah family, who unintentionally brought up during idle chat that blood is ultimately more important than anything else. A son born out of wedlock is still a biological son, surely better than handing over the ancestors' foundation to a collateral branch. These voices weren't loud, but they traveled precisely to Marquis Junbei's ears. He sat alone for a whole night in Chiyu's room, which was permeated with the smell of medicine, watching his eldest son lying there like the living dead, eyes vacant, and seeing the intense hatred and pleading that burst forth whenever their eyes met, made his heart feel like it was being twisted by a knife. This son is completely ruined. The future of the Marquise's manor cannot be tied to a cripple. He thought of that silent second son again. In his impression, the boy always kept his head down, wearing old clothes washed until they were faded, staying quietly in the corner like a shadow. His coursework seemed quite good. The tutor had once implicitly praised him for his high aptitude. Last time during the drowning incident, it was also him who jumped into Saviar, perhaps. Perhaps this is truly the will of heaven. Perhaps this son, whom he has always neglected, is the only hope sent by the ancestors to continue the family line of the Marquise's manor. Just before dawn, the Marquis of Genbei dragged his exhausted body out of the room and spoke hoarsely to the old butler guarding the door, his voice carrying a desolate resignation. Go, make arrangements. Yanzhou's birth mother, her spirit tablet. Bring it into the ancestral hall. Also move Yanzhou to Yizhuchuan to live. All allowances. Follow the young master's standard. The old butler's body jolted. He lowered his head and answered respectfully, Yes, Lord Marquis. This order was like dropping a giant boulder into a calm lake. Receiving the outside mistress's spirit tablet into the ancestral hall meant the Marquise's manor officially acknowledged Qi Yanzhou's birth mother. Although still lowly, Qi Yanzhou was no longer a fatherless bastard, but a concubine-born son, with a proper title, moving courtyards and raising his allowance, sent out an even clearer signal the Marquis was going to start grooming this son. The servants in the Marquise's manor were the shrewdest. The wind direction shifted in an instant. The once dilapidated small courtyard that no one cared about suddenly became bustling. Movers, people delivering daily necessities, those trying to curry favor, came in an endless stream. Qi Yanzhou remained silent. He calmly accepted all of this, moved into the spacious and elegant Yizu pavilion, put on well-fitting new clothes, and had exquisite meals. But there was no joy or smugness on his face, only a composure and wariness that was beyond his years. I knew, and he understood, that all of this didn't come out of thin air. He is a blade, and I am the one who handed him to the Marquis of Genbei. We tacitly kept our distance, yet in corners where no one noticed, our eyes would occasionally meet, conveying messages only the two of us understood. The alliance, silently solidifying. The Marquis of Genbei started bringing Qi Yanzhou along to some not-so-important occasions, letting him handle some simple estate affairs. Qi Yanzhou learned fast, did things methodically, and was calm and sparing with words. He actually managed to win the praise of a few old advisors. The subtitles in the air were a chorus of wailing. Woo-woo, the bastard has taken the spot. The male lead is still lying in bed, and they're already going to abandon him. Is the Marquise blind? How can that bastard compare to our heir? It is over. The fake childhood sweetheart script has completely collapsed into a substitute taking over. Listening to the maid parrot these comments, I gently blew on the scalding tea in my cup. Chiyu, did you hear that? The position of heir you care about most, the glory of the Marquise's manor you regard as your very life, is slipping away from you bit by bit, and the one replacing you is none other than that bastard you've always looked down on and wantonly bullied. This taste is it even more agonizing than being paralyzed in bed. Enjoy it. As spring turned to autumn, Qi Yanzhou's figure gradually appeared in the Marquise's manor study, the training grounds, and he even followed the Marquis of Genbei in and out of some informal official engagements. He was like a dry sponge, silently and swiftly absorbing everything. As for me, After my coming-of-age ceremony, the matchmakers proposing marriage nearly wore down the threshold of the Shah family home. Yet father and mother always politely refused with a smile. Until that day, news came from the palace that His Majesty was concerned about the matter of succession in the Marquis of Genbei's manor. Not long after, an imperial decree descended upon the Marquis's manor. Time flew by, and nearly a year had passed since that accident at the corner tower. Chiyu remained like a living corpse, trapped in a cage of brocade quilts and soft pillows, kept alive by precious medicinal ingredients and special attendants. The best decoctions in the Marquis of Genbei's manor sustained his life, and also sustained his lucid mind, making him clearly feel the changes in the outside world day after day. The servants in the manor had long since gotten used to the new direction. The wind was blowing. The heir apparent? Oh, that cripple lying in the small building in the backyard. How pitiful. But the future of the Marquise's manor is now tied to another young master. Young Master Qianzhou of Yizhu Pavilion. That bastard, who was once ignored and bullied by everyone, was now vastly different. He moved out of the dilapidated little courtyard and into the spacious and bright Yizhu Pavilion. He was still reticent, but his back was straighter. The Marquis of Genbei hired the best civil and martial masters, and he began to systematically study the classics, history, philosophy, and literature, the art of war and strategy, as well as riding, archery, and martial arts. He learned extremely fast. In essays and policy discussions, he often had startling insights. In riding and archery, though he started late, he was willing to put in the hard work and improved at lightning speed. Even the old advisors who initially held prejudices against him, after testing him a few times, had to stroke their beards and secretly praise. This lad has a resilient nature. He is an unpolished gem worth carving. The Marquis of Genbei took him along to handle some simple estate affairs, and he was clear and organized when taking him to attend some non-core social engagements. He behaved appropriately, remaining quiet and reserved, which conversely gave people an impression of being steady and reliable. Gradually, the rumor that Qianzhou, the second son of the Marquis of Genbei, although of blemished origins, is diligent and motivated, worthy of great responsibility, began to quietly circulate within specific circles of the capital. Behind this, naturally, were my father and his old subordinates, and colleagues subtly fanning the flames without leaving a trace. Pah, no matter how much that bastard pretends, he can't change his lowly birth. Exactly. The turtle dove occupying the magpie's nest. Shameless. Our heir you is the true legitimate line. You sycophantic lowlifes. The subtitles in the air were still full of hostility, but the voice seemed less self-righteous than before. Reality was pushing forward in an irreversible way. And I, Xia Zhiling, had also passed my coming-of-age ceremony. A 15-year-old maiden, like a newly blooming begonia, dazzlingly beautiful beyond compare. My family background was impeccable. My father was a leading figure among the upright civil officials. My mother came from a prominent Jiangnan clan, and coupled with my pitiful ordeal, I garnered quite a bit of sympathy and attention. After my coming-of-age ceremony, the matchmakers coming to propose marriage almost trampled the threshold of the Shah residence. There were those who sympathized with me and wanted to give me a good home. Those who valued the Shah family's power and sought an alliance, and those who simply felt my character and appearance were outstanding. But my father and mother always politely declined. The excuse was grand and impeccable. Their daughter had been frightened previously, and her spirit was damaged. She still needed to recuperate for some time, and would not consider marriage for the time being. Outsiders just assumed the Shah family cherished their daughter, or perhaps their standards were high and they wanted to find a better match. Only I knew that my parents were waiting for the most suitable opportunity, waiting for a result that would come naturally. The turning point occurred on a crisp, clear autumn day. News suddenly came from the palace that His Majesty, while chatting with a few key ministers, seemed to unintentionally bring up the Genbei Marquis manor, expressing a hint of concern regarding the Marquis getting on in years, while the position of the heir remains vacant, fearing it might threaten the stability of the realm. A single word from the Son of Heaven carries immense weight. This seemingly casual concern was like a clap of thunder, exploding throughout the court and beyond. Everyone understood that His Majesty was delivering a warning, as well as a hint. The issue of succession in the Marquis of Genbei's manor could not be dragged on any longer. It was time to make a decision. Those forces that had been waiting and watching, or even secretly obstructing, instantly died down under this display of imperial might. The Marquis of Genbei, Qi knelt outside the imperial study for 2 whole hours. After coming out, he seemed to have aged a few more years, but in his eyes there was a trace of relieved determination. A few days later, a bright yellow imperial decree, surrounded by a ceremonial guard, arrived grandly at the Marquis of Genbei's manor. The entire household, high and low, burned incense and bathed, kneeling to welcome the imperial decree. The shrill voice of the eunuch, reading the decree, echoed through the silent courtyard. By the will of heaven, the emperor decrees, the Marquis of Genbei, Qi is loyal and devoted to the country. However, his eldest son, Qi is unfortunately disabled and cannot carry on the ancestral line. The second son, Qi, though born of a concubine, is of honest character, diligent, and eager to learn, making him worthy to be the heir. Thus, in strict observance of ancestral teachings and in accordance with public sentiment, we respectfully announce to heaven, earth, the ancestral temple, and the state, that we confer the book and seal upon Qi, establishing him as the heir of the Marquis of Genbei. Respect this. This subject receives the decree and gives thanks for the grace. Long live my emperor. Long live, long live. Qi voice was calm and steady, betraying not a single ripple of emotion. He respectfully took the book and seal representing the status of the heir, and amidst the complicated gazes of the crowd, slowly stood up. The title of heir had changed hands. The dust had settled. On the day the imperial decree was issued, the Marquis's manor set up a simple incense altar to inform the ancestors. I asked Mother for permission, and taking 2 reliable older maidservants with me, I pushed a wheelchair to the small building in the back courtyard where Qi was recuperating. The small building was still filled with a heavy smell of medicine. Qi had been cleaned up reasonably well, wearing soft nightclothes and leaning against a specially made high pillow. He was so thin he had wasted away, with sunken eye sockets, but those eyes suddenly burst with a terrifying light because of our intrusion. Hatred, rage, despair, unwillingness, all kinds of emotions almost seemed to split his hollow eyeballs apart. I had the old servant push his wheelchair to the window. The window was open, allowing a distant view of the curling smoke rising from the ancestral hall in the front courtyard, as well as the faint sounds of ceremonial music announcing the birth of the new heir. I walked over to him, bent down, and whispered softly in a voice that only the 2 of us could hear, like a lover's murmur. Husband, did you hear it? Did you see it? His Majesty has issued a decree. From today on, the heir of the Marquis of Genbei's manor is Qi. This position you care about most now belongs to that bastard you've always looked down on. Are you happy? A rasping, despairing wheeze like a wild beast emitted from Qiyu's throat. His eyeballs, the only part of his body he could move, trembled violently, and bloody tears actually seeped out from the corners of his eyes. But he couldn't move, couldn't speak. He could only be like a rotting puppet, enduring this heart-piercing, bone-deep torture of 1,000 cuts. Beast, Sha Xiling, you beast! How dare you treat the male lead like this? The male lead sob. He is so miserable. Qianzhou and that female side character will die a horrible death. The floating subtitles were cursing frantically, yet they couldn't alleviate even 1/10,000th of Qiyu's pain right now. I looked at his miserable appearance, holding not a shred of pity in my heart, only the thrill of revenge, finally taken. Just then, the sound of steady footsteps came from outside the door. Cheonjo walked in, dressed in the daily attire of an heir, his posture appearing even more upright and tall. His gaze calmly swept over the withered, furiously staring Chiyu in the wheelchair, then landed on me as he nodded slightly. I straightened up and gave him a faint smile. The Marquis of Genbei walked in afterwards as well. Seeing Chiyu and me by the window, he sighed with a complicated expression, but ultimately said nothing. The matter was a foregone conclusion. This eldest son was ruined after all. The future of the Marquise's manor needed new hope. Miss Shah. The Marquis of Genbei looked at me, his tone carrying a trace of imperceptible ingratiation and probing. Now that Yanzhou has been established as the heir, the engagement between him and you. Yanzhou also looked at me, deep within his quiet eyes. A glimmer of light seemed to flit past. I lowered my eyelashes, putting on a shy appearance, and said softly, "It is entirely up to the Marquis and my father and mother to decide." The Marquis of Genbei's face immediately revealed a smile of relief. Good, good. I will go discuss with Lord Shah right now. Choose a lucky day and re-establish the engagement for you two. The new engagement, within a tacit understanding that went unspoken, was quickly put on the agenda. The wedding date for Yanzhou and me was set for the 6th of next month. With the wedding date set, the entire Marquise's manor immediately became busy. Although Yanzhou was a concubine's son made heir, and I was technically marrying a second time. The Marquis of Genbei seemed intent on using this opportunity to drive away bad luck and sweep away the gloom in the manor, organizing the wedding to be quite grand. Red silks were hung up. Double happiness characters were pasted all over the window lattices, and the servants' faces also carried a few more genuine smiles, as if they had truly welcomed new hope. Everyone tacitly stopped mentioning Chiyu in the small building in the backyard, as well as Shaliran in that desolate nunnery outside the city. One was already a cripple, the other was as good as a prisoner. It seemed they could no longer make any waves, but we all underestimated the madness spawned by jealousy and despair. Shaliran's days in the nunnery were not easy, accompanied only by the dim oil lamp and old Buddha statues. Eating coarse tea and bland rice, she also had to endure the nuns' cold stares and heavy drudgery. Although she grew up poor in the countryside, when had she ever suffered such torment? More importantly, she had lost her only hope, Chiyo. When the news of my engagement to Yanzhou reached the nunnery, the last string of her sanity completely snapped. She was unwilling to accept it. She was the one Chiyu truly loved. She should have been the mistress of the Marquise's mansion, enjoying all of this. It was that bitch Sha Xiling who stole everything from her. Now, even her last hope was about to be taken away. A wicked plan began to take shape in her mind. Since they couldn't go on living, they would die together. She would drag Chiyu down with her, stage a double suicide, and leave behind evidence pointing to Sha Xiling forcing her adulterous husband and wife to commit suicide. Even if she couldn't drag Sha Xiling down with her, she would still taint her wedding with Yanzhou with indelible bad luck. She used the last of her jewelry to bribe a greedy, rough workmaid, and on a moonless night, secretly slipped out of the nunnery, sneaking back into the backyard of the Marquis of Genbei's residence, where the guard had already relaxed considerably. Chiyu's small building was as dead silent as ever. Only the page boy on night watch was dozing off outside the door. Xia Laran slipped in like a ghost, a strong smell of medicine hitting her face. Borrowing the faint light from outside the window, she saw that emaciated, skeleton-like figure on the bed. "Brother Yu." She choked with sobs and threw herself at the bedside, tears streaming down. Chiyu's originally hollow eyes, upon seeing her, suddenly burst with shocking brilliance. It was astonishment, excitement, and even a trace of indescribable fear. A rasping he sound came from his throat. He tried desperately to shake his head but couldn't move a muscle. "Brother Yu, don't be afraid. Liren is here." A twisted yet gentle smile appeared on Shalaron's face as she took a small porcelain bottle from her bosom, inside of which was a medicinal juice thick and black as ink, emitting a pungent odor. I know you are in pain. I know you don't want to live like this. Laren will accompany you. We'll go together. On the road to the Yellow Springs, you won't be alone. She brought the medicine bottle to Chiyu's lips, her eyes burning with fervor. Drink this, and we'll be together forever. Let that bitch Xia Xiaoling, that bastard Qianzhou, be buried with us. Chiyu's eyes were filled with extreme terror and resistance. He didn't want to die. Even if he lived such a wretched life, he still wanted to live. He desperately tried to close his mouth, but his jaw was powerless. He could only let that medicinal liquid emitting the breath of death draw near. Lely, don't. She is crazy. She really is going to poison the male lead to death. It is over. It is really over this time. Right at this critical moment. Bang! The door was kicked open violently. The light of the torches instantly dispelled the darkness in the room. Qianzhou and the Marquis of Zhenbei, along with his guards, appeared at the doorway like divine soldiers descending from the heavens. You vile woman, stop! Marquis Zhenbei roared, his eyes bloodshot with rage. Shalaran went rigid with fright at this sudden turn of events. The medicine bottle hit the ground with a clang, spilling thick black liquid that sizzled as it corroded the floor. Obviously, it was a deadly poison. That is not it. Shalaran's face turned deathly pale as she still tried to deny it. Qianzhou lunged forward and kicked away the medicine bottle beside her, while the guards swarmed in and pinned her down tight. I walked slowly to the bedside, looking at Chiyu, who was still in shock and drenched in cold sweat, then looked at the puddle of poison on the ground. Then my gaze landed on Shalaran, who looked completely deranged, and said with an icy voice, Shalaran caught red-handed. What else do you have to say? It was you. You set me up. Shalaran struggled, glaring at me with bloodshot eyes, screaming hoarsely, You vicious bitch. You won't die a good death. Set you up, I scoffed, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from my sleeve. It was a fragment of the secret letter she wrote when bribing the old servant. If you didn't harbor evil intentions, who could have set you up? You intended to poison the air, staged the scene, and framed me. The evidence is solid. The Marquis of Zhenbei trembled all over with rage, pointing at Shalaran. You venomous woman, to think my manor sheltered you. Yet you dared to murder my son. Men, tie her up. Send her to the capital magistrate's office. Punish her according to the law. Lord Marquis, spare my life. Shalaran was completely panicked, crying and shouting. It was the air, he made me do it. He didn't want to live anymore, he wanted me to accompany him. Shut up! The Marquis of Zhenbei shouted angrily, not believing her nonsense at all. How could a living dead person order her? Shalaran was roughly dragged away by the guards, her crying and cursing gradually fading away. I walked to Chiyu's bedside, looking at his pupils trembling violently from extreme terror and lingering fear, bent down and whispered in a voice as soft as a feather, yet as cruel as a knife. Look, the person you hold most dear, in the end, they didn't want to save you, but to drag you down to hell with them. Chiyu, your whole life is just a joke. Chiyu's pupils suddenly constricted to the extreme, and then completely lost their luster, leaving only the dead gray of despair. Shalaran's fate could be easily imagined. Plotting to murder the heir is a crime punishable by death, with the Marquis of Zhenbei's manor and the Shah family applying pressure simultaneously. The governor of the capital passed sentence very quickly execution after autumn. She ultimately died on the eve of what she hated most, my grand wedding with Qianzhou. When the news arrived, I was trying on my bright red wedding dress. Listening to the maid's report, I looked at myself in the mirror, decked out in the phoenix crown and bridal robes with a fierce look in my eyes, and slowly curled my lips. The 6th day, an auspicious day, suitable for weddings. The Marquis of Genbei's manor was immersed in a sea of red from the early morning. Firecrackers popped from the head of the street to the end of the alley. Gongs and drums were deafening, and the guests' carriages and horses blocked the street in front of the manor so tightly that not even water could trickle through. Although the groom was a concubine's son, inheriting the position, and the bride was remarrying. The power of the Marquis of Genbei's manor, the noble prestige of the Shah family, and His Majesty's implied tacit consent made this wedding the liveliest event in the capital since the year began. The front hall was draped in red and colorful decorations, overflowing with festive cheer. I wore a bright red wedding dress with intricate embroidery symbolizing fertility and fortune, and on my head was a heavy pure gold phoenix crown with kingfisher feathers. The beaded veil hung down, obscuring most of my face, revealing only my carefully painted red lips and chin. Qianzhou was also dressed in bright red wedding robes, making his face look as fair as jade and his posture tall and straight. Perhaps due to his change in status and a year of seasoning, the last traces of boyishness had faded from his brow, replaced by a sense of composure and authority. We stood side by side, and amidst the loud chanting of the ceremonial official, we bowed first to heaven and earth, second to the high hall, and third to each other. With every bow, I could feel gazes of all kinds cast from all directions. There was envy, jealousy, scrutiny, and also subtle pity or disdain. But the blood in my whole body ran hot. I have waited 2 lifetimes for this day. The ceremony is complete. Escort them to the bridal chamber. Cheers, blessings, and the sounds of clinking glasses instantly engulfed us. Qianzhou gently held my hand. His palm was dry and warm, carrying a kind of firm strength. Surrounded by the crowd, we walked toward the meticulously decorated bridal chamber. The location of the bridal chamber's window was specially chosen by Qianzhou. Pushing open the window, one could see the small detached building in the backyard from a far Chiyu's cage. Inside the bridal chamber, red candles burned high, and the fragrance was rich. The wedding matron spoke auspicious words, and the maids retreated with suppressed smiles, leaving the space to us, newlyweds. Qianzhou picked up the white jade nuptial cups from the table, filled them with wine, and handed one to me. We crossed our arms and drank the nuptial wine that symbolized sharing joys and sorrows together. The liquor was spicy yet sweet as it slid down my throat, as if I were swallowing the bitterness of my past life and the scheming of this one all at once. I put down the cup, and the room fell into a brief silence. The red candles crackled. I looked up at Qianzhou. He was looking at me too, his gaze deep, swirling with many emotions. I couldn't clearly distinguish gratitude, tacit understanding, and perhaps a hint of some faint affection. After a year of joining hands in secret and calculating every step, what lies between us has long surpassed a simple relationship of mutual use. "Let's go," I said softly, breaking the silence. He nodded slightly, not asking where. We were of one mind. He picked up a thick cloak and carefully draped it over me. Then, we quietly left the noisy bridal chamber, crossed the silent corridor, and headed toward that lonely little building in the backyard. Inside the little building, the lingering smell of medicine still hung in the air, lifeless and heavy. The old woman guarding the place was startled when she saw us and hurriedly curtsied. Qianzhou waved his hand, signaling for her to leave. We walked into that room. Chiyu was still leaning against the bed in the same posture, like a shell with its soul drained out. Hearing footsteps, his eyes turned mechanically. When the figures of the two of us, especially those blinding bright red wedding robes, came into his view, his eyes previously like dead water, suddenly surged with raging waves. Hate, monstrous hatred. It almost seemed to take physical form, ready to burn us to ashes. And that bone-deep despair, humiliation, and disbelief. We actually came before him wearing wedding robes. In the cage where he lingered on his last breath, to flaunt their victory. I walked slowly to the bedside, Qianzhou following quietly at my side. I looked at his face, twisted and hideous from extreme pain, watched the tears mixed with streaks of blood seeping from the corners of his eyes once more. Yet my heart held not a single ripple of emotion. "Husband!" I spoke, my voice soft, yet every word was like a knife scraping bone and gouging the heart. "Today is the big day for Yanzhou and me. Do you see it? This marquise's manor, decorated with lanterns and streamers, full of guests, all celebrating the new heir and the new heir's wife. Without you, the marquise's manor is still glorious, even more lively than before." Qianzhou reached out and wrapped his arm around my shoulder, his manner intimate and natural. He looked at Qiyu, his gaze calm, yet carrying a victor's declaration. "Big brother," he spoke, his voice steady, rest assured. "I will take good care of the marquise's manor. I will take good care of Xialing too. You, just rest easy and recuperate." He bit down hard on the words, rest easy. A hoarse, desperate rasp like a trapped beast came from Chiyu's throat, his whole body shaking violently, eyes bulging and bloodshot, staring dead at us as if he wanted to slice us into 1,000 pieces with his gaze. But he couldn't do a thing. He could only watch helplessly and feel it, watching everything he cherished, most being taken away by the people he despised the most, watching his enemies being loving and blissful right in front of him. This is a torture more cruel than death by 1,000 cuts. Looking at him in this state, the last shred of resentment from my past life finally vanished into thin air. I leaned into Qianzhou's embrace, turned around, and stopped looking at that pile of nauseating rotten mud. "Let's go," I said. "Okay." We left arm in arm, the red hem of the robe brushing over the threshold like a banner of victory. Behind was Chiyu's final broken, silent wail, and the thoroughly sunken, eternal darkness. It is said that on that night, the new heir of the Marquis of Zhenbei's manor and his wife spent their wedding night entangled in passionate love, and that cripple in the small building in the backyard, amidst extreme rage, regret, and humiliation, vomited blood endlessly, his breath fading, and didn't make it through that festive night. But who cares?